person coming late. All right, folks, so it is still Q2. It is week 1, and today is November 10th. Some other folks are going to get this lecture on the 12th. So, thank you. And today we're going to talk about the composition of blood. Where have you heard the word composition before, or to compose?
MCAS.
All right, so maybe on the MCAS, right? So it's a pretty common word on an assessment. Where else? What class do you hear it very commonly? Or you're thinking decompose, right? So in biology class, we talk about decomposers, organisms that break down. All right, so if decomposition is to break something down into smaller units, what do we think a composition is?
Combine.
Something to build stuff.
Right, so building, combining, putting together. If you're asked to compose an essay, right, you are pasting words together into a meaningful format that tells a story, makes a claim, provides evidence. So when we think about the composition of the blood, we're talking about what makes up the blood. What are the pieces of the blood? What is it composed of? And in reference to the blood, we can think about this a little bit metaphorically. How is the blood in our body very similar to the water of a river? What are some ways in which they have commonalities? Please.
They both flow.
All right, for one thing, they both flow. And
They're both blue.
they both have, right, a particular color to them. That's like their natural color state. And in reference to that flow, are rivers like bidirectional or are they unidirectional? Do they flow in one direction or in two? In one, right? Our blood does the same thing. It moves in one direction, right? It goes away from the heart and then back up to it. Now, what else about a river and blood are similar? Yep, so they both flow. All right, so because they are liquids, right, they have movement. Are they like water? Are they clear liquids? Is a river, like you look at it, it looks like the water that comes out of our faucet? No, because of why?
It's dirty.
Organism.
All right, there's organisms, might be pollution, there's things in the water. Just like there are things in our blood, right? So there are nutrients in our blood, there are cells in our blood. So both of them have living and non-living components. Nice teamwork there. Do both rivers and blood always flow smoothly?
No.
What can happen?
They get stuck.
They get stuck. There can be blockages. What can, for example, block a river's flow?
Oh, stay.
Maybe a dam, right? Or some debris, or like a tree falls in it or something. What can block blood flow? What choices could you make in your life that could block your blood flow?
Smoke.
All right, great. So making some maybe bad choices that change the composition of the blood. What kind of foods might cause a slowing down or?
Meat.
Being obese.
Meats because they're high in fats and proteins, as well as being obese, right? So you can make choices that prevent your blood from flowing. And why do we want blood to flow again? Yesterday we talked about if you hold your breath, your heart stops beating, or stops beating as quickly. Because we're losing what? Oxygen. Right, so we want to make sure to eat foods that nourish our body and don't block our bloodstream, so then we lose out on the chance to oxygenate our cells and brain. All right, so let's get cranky with our little cup of choice here. Some people were missing from the cup, so I've added them back in. If we could have someone read our quote for the day, please. Excellent.
There's two eggs. There's two eggs. And
There is?
they like
Doesn't make any
five
sense
times.
because there was one broken up before. Either way, it's the person that got pulled.
Okay, but
All right, Eddie, can you or can someone else say more about this? How do you interpret this statement? So don't be shy, folks. Go ahead and try it out. What do you think? Where's blood found?
In our veins.
In our body.
All right, so in our bodies, in people, in our veins, right? If we're saying that blood moves history, are we thinking that the blood is still in the person or maybe has come out?
It's been everywhere.
All right, what is a thing that changes culture often in society. Thank you, dear. I hope it was worth it. All right, so always ask yourself that, right? Like, is this message worth using my phone for the rest of the day? Just, just to be sure and clear. All right, so what kind of thing, do people always get along? No, right? And do countries always get along? What often happens between people and or countries? Wars, right? After a war, does culture change?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? So when blood is spilled, right, when blood comes out of a person, history moves on, right? Something new develops as a consequence of it. It may not be the right time for such a- all right, and then tonight we're going to be doing you're going to read an article, which I'll distribute, but we're going to have some notey goodness first. You can see on your table there are pencils, so you know what kind of trick is coming up. All right, so first I want to talk about a part of the blood called plasma. And we've actually seen this word plasma before. Where have we seen this word? In the plasma cell membrane, right? So plasma, as I mentioned in the last chapter, we talked about cytoplasm, right? Plasma is some kind of fluid, some kind of liquid. Yes?
Isn't it I don't even know how you call plasmic reticulum.
We use endoplasmic reticulum, that corridor filled with liquid in a cell. This one's just black. Yeah, I'll cue you the colors on the next slide. Right, so plasma is composed of abiotic, aka non-living, and folks may have noticed in their lifetime at this point, particularly if they've paid attention in ELA, that when you put the prefix A in front of a word, it negates it, right? So if I say, for example, atypical or asymmetrical, what am I saying? Not symmetrical, right? Like not the same on both sides. Or if I say something is atypical, it is not typical or normal, right? So thinking about how the letter A can often negate the meaning of a word. And of course we remember that bio means life. It's the main topic of our course. So plasma is a lot of non-living proteins, such as hormones and enzymes, which we're going to cover in chapter 7, so 2 chapters from now. There's a high volume of water, as well as many other nutrients, such as salts, potassium, calcium, whatever it is your body is circulating at the moment. Now, this plasma makes up the majority of our blood. In fact, it makes up 55% of our blood's total. Now, we can take a moment to think about this fact, this statement. If we're saying that the majority of the blood is a non-living substance, and what about what percent of our body is water? Now remember, like 70-ish, so somewhere in the 70s? Is water a living thing? No, right? Water's not a living thing. So what we're really saying is that the majority of your body is made up of a non-living substance. In fact, you are undead, right? So like, you've got some cells that are moving all these non-living things, but the majority of you is actually a non-living substance. And this plasma, like our river we talked about before, sometimes this plasma is free-flowing, right? It's like a healthy river full of cells and nutrients, and other times it might be a polluted river full of toxins and things that would damage your body. And of course, this directly comes from the choices you make or maybe the place you're in, right? If you're in a polluted environment, you are involuntarily going to breathe in substances that might damage you. What was one we talked about a little bit yesterday? That you get second from someone else? Or maybe it wasn't your past that name. Smoke, right? If you were on a smoker and you were inhaling secondhand smoke, you are still taking in all of the toxins that the smoker is, right? So in that case, your blood, your composition would change to that of a polluted blood, even though you didn't actually make the choice to smoke yourself. It's quite abusive of them to do that around you. All right, so we're ready to move on. right, so the first blood cell we're talking about today is our white blood cell, but more appropriately called our leukocyte. So we've all heard of white blood cells before, but now we start adding our high school vocabulary. We're doing this word in blue today. So getting out your darker of your two blues, and so doing the word leukocyte in blue. And leukocyte kind of sounded like a disease you've heard of before. Leukemia, right? Leukemia is a disorder where your body cannot make white blood cells. It's not able to defend itself against foreign invaders. So leukocytes come in two major groups. We're going to talk about one of the groups today and the other group more specifically in the next chapter. But one of these major groups are known as phagocytes. Phagos being the Greek word meaning to eat or devour or consume. And notice that I'm coloring the prefix and suffix here. I'm doing the prefix phago in orange as well as the word to eat. Phagocytosis comes up on the MCAS pretty regularly, so I want to give us better opportunity to integrate that information into our schema, into our schematics of life. And site, we actually saw before in the word cytoplasm, right? So cyto meaning cell, or site meaning cell. So we're literally saying eating of cells. So what white blood cells do is they devour things that invade your body. Generally, a blanket word often used is this idea of a neoplasm. So I have dark green for neo, meaning new, and lighter green for plasm, meaning germ, seed, meaning germ or seed. And what we're saying is that if something foreign enters your body, a virus, a bacteria, a toxin, maybe from secondhand smoke, these phagocytes will devour those particles. They will consume them. A lot of people get fungal infections in the warm, moist, dark areas of their body. And these can often be combated by your leukocytes, by your white blood cells, by your immune system. And we want to think about this in reference to being kind of like an army, right? So these are the soldiers of your body. Do soldiers make up the majority or the minority of our population? Are lots of people soldiers, or is it just a few? It's a very small percent. In fact, for our white blood cells, they make up less than 1% of our blood volume. So just like we have a military, the soldiers, they protect us from threats at home. They go off and kill foreigners in their own lands. And they make up a very small percent of our population, but they have a very important job. So we'll, again, here talk about how less than 1% of the population is white blood cells. We're also going to draw a little picture. I recognize for the folks with the cheap seats in the back, you probably can't see this very well. So I'll draw a better representation up here. Right? Notice that our white blood cell has a lot of these little finger-like projections. What was the name we had for these just yesterday and last Monday? When a cell has small finger-like projections on it? Cilia, right? So you think about these as being like cilia. Our white blood cell, our leukocyte, like all eukaryotic cells, will have a nucleus. So we'll go ahead and we'll draw that into our drawing. And the drawing can be right to the side of or right underneath your thing. We don't have too many notes today. All right, so that would be our leukocyte, aka our white blood cell. So I'll put WBC. And we're going to have several lessons about leukocytes specifically in the next chapter. This is just an introduction to the composition of blood. All right, now, whenever you are sick, whenever you're sick or injured, what is something that oozes out of your body? Something you see. Let's say I've got a cut, and over time it's starting to heal. So you might see some blood. What else do you see?
Isn't that thing after like days? It's like a cast.
Scab.
All right, so you've got a scab, which is red. What else might you see if the cut has become infected?
White cell.
Pus, white cells, right? You will actually visibly see leukocytes, right? Pus is an example of these leukocytes having gone to battle, right? These are their corpses, the soldiers' corpses after they've fallen in the line of duty, right? So, and this also goes for when you have really thick mucus when you're sick, right? So we've all had a runny nose, and sometimes it's very clear, very liquidy, right? That means there's very few leukocytes, but if it's very thick and viscous and white or yellow, there's a lot of leukocytes. A lot of white blood cells have died defending you from a foreign invader. All right, so let's move on to our next blood cell type. Our thrombocytes, also known as platelets. Now, unlike our leukocytes, our platelets are not a true cell. They don't have a nucleus. That's in our purple. Thank you for checking that out. Yeah, so in our purple today, we're going to do our thrombocytes, our platelets. And these cell fragments, they're not true cells, are clotted blood around internal and external integument. We're going to talk a lot about the integumentary system in the next chapter, but I've given you a hint for now. It's a membrane. Now, Flo mentioned that right after you've had a cut, you see scabbing. Scabbing is evidence of your thrombocytes, right? That these blood clotting fragments have stuck together. Why is that? Why have scabs and this clotting action? What would happen if you didn't have this? You had a cut. The cut would continue to hemorrhage, right? You would continue to bleed. In fact, some people have a disorder known as hemophilia, where you don't have enough platelets in your bloodstream, and even the smallest cut will continue to bleed profusely. The bleeding will not stop, and you'll have to go to the hospital and get it mended up. All right, now platelets, very similar to our white blood cells, make up a pretty small percent of our blood's volume. They only make up about 3% of our blood's volume.
Doesn't that happen to diabetics? Like, their cuts take longer than usual to do?
Yeah, right, so their blood composition is often really different. A lot of diseases, right, cause problems in other areas as well. Kind of similar to how we talk about our homeostasis chart, right? When you've got a problem in one part of your life or your body, it tends to create problems in other areas. All right, so again, these make up about 3% of our blood volume. And we're going to go ahead and draw a figure here. Now, these are kind of similar to our leukocytes, but what's different about the projections off of them? So as our white blood cell have these small, like cilia-like structures, what does this more look like? Instead of short, they are long, right? We're also going to do for our drawing that we're doing together is our platelets are much smaller than a leukocyte. So we're going to draw it to look a little bit like a spider or a brittle starfish, right? So draw your platelet so that it's much smaller than your leukocyte, but its diameter is still similar based on these long projections, right? So that's our thrombocyte. And I apologize for not using the smartboard in the usual way today. It's not responding to my computer for some reason. Let's try to see if I can't print right now. But anyhow, so notice here that both objects are similar in diameter, except one of them has a very small cell body and large projections. Yeah.
You computed that?
I'm trying to get another one. So here is the key. There is the place. All right, so, and just off your common knowledge, I bet folks can guess what's going to be on the next slide. So we've talked about white blood cells, we've talked about the liquid plasma, we've also talked about clotting agents, platelets. What blood cell are we missing? Our red blood cells. Awesome. All right, like the other two, it has a more anatomical name versus just our common everyday name. So red blood cells, their real name, we're going to call it, is erythrocytes. It is in red. All right, so our erythrocytes are our red blood cells. And they have this sticky protein called hemoglobin. And they have a lot of a particular kind of mineral. Depending on which middle school science experience you had, some folks from every class have known this today. Does anyone know what this is? What element that is? What atom? You may or may not know. It depends on your exposure. It is, huh? Iron. Awesome. Right, so ferrous, if you ever looked at iron pills on the vitamin bottle, you'll see the word ferrous on there. Right, so hemoglobin, and so there's a lot of this protein protein, a lot of this iron. And what the proteins and the irons do together is they capture and transport oxygen. Now, our red blood cells can live for a very long time, somewhere between 120 days. So if you donate blood, the Red Cross has a good stretch of time before they have to give it to someone, about a third of a year. As long as they keep the blood at the right temperature in a nutrient solution. Right, so these red blood cells can live for a while, and they make up, what percent is left, right? So far I talked about the percent of plasma, which was what? What percent of the blood was plasma? First one today.
One.
That was our white blood cells. Anybody? Plasma? Or about 55, and then we had 1, and then we had 3, which gives us 59, right? So great. So give or take, right? So 59, 58, because we talked about how the white blood cells make up less than 1%. So about 42% of our blood's total volume are these erythrocytes. And if we look down at our veins, do we see red? No, but yet if I get a cut, what comes out? Why? Because of the oxygen, right? When your red blood cells come in contact with oxygen, they turn that bright red color. Now, there's a particular planet in our solar system that has a lot of its soil made up of iron. It's a planet that has a reddish color. Mars, right? So, if I take iron, if I take metal, and I leave it out in the environment for a long time, what color does it turn? What happens to iron or metal that's been left out? It rusts. And rust has a what kind of color? A brownish, reddish orange, right? So once again, when iron is exposed to oxygen, it takes on a red coloration, right? Just like our blood would. All right, now we have 2 choices from here as a class. We have a diagram on the next slide that we're going to draw. We can either do it at the end of the lab, and that'll tie the meaning of the lab together, or we can pre-do it, and then the lab will, will hopefully maybe make a little more sense, with less of a mystery involved. So our folks, we'll do a vote, right? Our folks are like, I'm ready to get up and just do my lab, or are folks like, hey, let's just keep the notes going and finish it off. Yeah. So if you want option A, you're like, I want to get to the lab and do the drawing later, please raise your hand.
Good choice, guys.
Okay, so that means nobody. All right, so it looks like the choice we're going for is we're going to finish the notes, right? Great. So underneath our activity section, we're going to take down this chart. So right underneath your activity section, Nathan, looks like you are missing the drawings here. Yeah. And you'll notice that when we did our 3 drawings before, I had left red blood cells off because I knew we were doing this drawing coming up. Notice that you have the red blood cells. Miss Milton, could you click the light switch for us? See if anything happens. Oh, it's right over here, dear. There we go. Okay, that should help out the folks in the back a little bit. Now, what we're going to look at in today's lab is we're going to do a blood typing experiment where we've got a crime scene, we have suspects, and we're going to test the blood of the crime scene versus the blood of the suspects to figure out who done it. So what we need to know in advance, though, is what blood types are and how they work. So what you notice is that our red blood cells, which all have this ovular shape and a depression in the middle, have different cell surfaces. You might remember from our notes last time when we did plasma membrane notes that we talked about the little glycoproteins, the carbohydrates that stick up off of cells. That's what we're seeing here. We're seeing the cell's name tag. We're seeing its signature. What we might also notice is that you have antibodies, things in your bloodstream, that will react against the opposite blood type of your own. That's why it's important to get blood transfusions from people of the same blood type. You'll notice that here we have these little Y-shaped ones, which would fit those triangles B to B, versus these little crescent ones, which would fit over our circles there. So when we do our experiment later, we'll be using antibody B against A and B and figure out how they clump and clot. Yeah? Yeah, please do. We'll get you a stool. All right, so, and before we start the lab, I'll demo it on how it looks. But basically what you'll see is that blood will clot if its oppositional antibody interacts with it, right? The little sticks here, the antibodies will stick to the cell and form globs. So after we finish our drawing, we'll look at that.